Well, again, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second session. We'll just let Sean get some water here and wet his whistle again. So I'll do it while Sean's doing that, we'll do a little bit of introduction to the session. So this panel is a panel discussion looking at vaping from a global perspective. And joining with me today is Aaron Brian Carter, Managing Director of NGP Trends. Sean, as you've all heard for the last half hour, President and Partner of Flavor Art North America. And Lee Bryan, Managing Director of Arcus Compliance in the UK. My name is John Dunn. I'm the Director General of the UK Vaping Industry Association, and I'll be moderating the session today and adding my 2 cents where it makes sense. So we're going to kind of kick off. I think, Aaron, you were curious to lead us off this morning, and you're going to be looking at things like discussing the recent trends with single-use vapes, for instance, an overview of flavor trends, and a little bit about product innovation. So do you want to lead us off?
One. That's working. Okay, that's good. That's a good start. I think when I look at product innovations and product development, I go beyond vape a little bit. Obviously we're at the Global Vape Show, but the whole category exists for optionality for the consumer. So when I'm looking at product development, I'm looking at product development in heated tobacco, I'm looking at product development in e-vapor, oral nicotine pouches, and then some potential other new vehicles that could deliver nicotine, right? It's a very opportunistic category, but again, it exists for optionality, not one size fits all. Zoning back into e-vapor, we can't hide from the fact that the biggest trend at the moment, which I don't think is going to go away anytime soon, is disposable vapes. There's a number of benefits in disposable vapes that we're all aware of in terms of simplicity, perceived value, basically more puffs for your buck. And there's a lot of those benefits, in my point of view, that are already available in pod systems. So I think, if we're going to shift back to pod systems, there's a lot of learnings there that we can take from disposable vapes and put back into closed pod systems. But going on disposable vapes, trends that I've observed at the moment, one of the key trends that I'm seeing with some of the disposable vapes is moving away from the liquid substrate that you would have in a device, almost like a sponge that would contain the liquid, and more going towards the free liquid tank. So having a free liquid tank, not within the substrate, clearly the benefit there is that you're getting all that liquid out of the device. The issue with the substrate, well, first of all, there's benefits with the substrate. It's very affordable, right? It's cheap to manufacture. It's useful for preventing leakages. But as we've seen, or as you know, if you had a sponge, you'll never be able to fully squeeze all that liquid out of the sponge, right? So for like a 2 ml sponge, you're probably getting about 1.5 out of that. So for a free liquid tank, you can use all of that and you're more likely to achieve that claimed number of puffs. Hopefully you've got a big enough battery that you don't want to run out before that. The other consumer benefit is that the user can see that liquid in the tank. So the consumer can track how much is used and also track how much is left. Again, if you've got liquid left and the battery runs out first, that's not great, but hopefully that doesn't happen. And we've seen innovations here today. I know with the latest disposable from Film, the Film Max, they use an open tank with the free liquid. Another trend that we're seeing, apologies, this is a little bit long-winded. Another trend that we're seeing is moving away from the traditional cylindrical long format of a device and going more towards the box format. Companies like Flonk, they've changed the way that they're designing their product to be more of a box-like format. Benefits there, you've got comfort in use, size in hand, it's quite comfortable to use, it's pocketable, it's discreet, but also because it's manufactured on its side, you've got more space for a larger battery. So again, being able to achieve that claimed number of puffs. And then the third innovation that we're seeing, the third trend is, and it's something that we should all be thinking about, is designing a product from manufacturing all the way to retail, supported by recyclability. So making the device, obviously, as we know, we don't want to go on the negative points, but disposable, vapes have got their eyes on them at the moment in terms of the environmental impact, but products like Slicks, who have made, strive to really position their brand all the way from manufacturing all the way to retail as a more sustainable product, easy to recycle, less time consuming. So I would say they're the kind of like key trends that I'm seeing in disposables, if that's where we're focusing at the moment. And in terms of flavors, I mean, this is not going to be new news to anyone, but if we jump back 5-10 years ago, when we see single fruit flavors like your cherries or your grapes or your melons, we're seeing now more fruit combinations. So we're seeing fruit and fruit like guava passion fruit, for example, or we're seeing fruits and ice. So for a lot of brands, blueberry ice is one of the key flavors at the moment, or fruits and drinks like pink lemonade or strawberry milk. So that's something around the fruit flavor trends that we're seeing. And then another trend that we've observed recently is more of a target towards refreshing flavors. So we've seen a few developments with cucumber flavors. And cucumber is quite an interesting flavor. It's obviously refreshing. So in warmer climates, you've got that kind of perceived hydration. It's quite a good base flavor to add other flavors to. You're the experts, you can tell me, but it's a good base flavor to add other flavors too, right? You can add lime to it, or you can add other things. And then it could also be an answer to that, again, on the topic of hydration. We have what people will call in the categories vapor's mouth. I get it quite a lot, that's why I need my water, or I need some chewing gum. But that could also be an answer to help hydrate and alleviate that vape dryness as well. So that's a quick snapshot of some trends that I'm seeing in vapes at the moment. So.
Sounds good. You touched on flavors there, and obviously flavor profiles change all over the world, but some of the concern that at least I'm seeing from a regulatory perspective is around the safety of some of these flavors. Lee and Sean, what are you seeing in your submissions with dealing with your clients? Are they really looking at the types of liquids they're using and how safe are the ingredients that they're using in the products that we're bringing to market? We'll go with you firstly, yeah.
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear with the disco behind me at the moment. So. Well, I think there's certainly since the UK came away from using the EU CHEG system and developed their own MHRA system, there was a lot more focus on the toxicology and the quality of the CAS data submitted. In the main, the majority of the big, well, in fairness, all of the big flavour houses are really, really good at ensuring that they have their white lists or green lists of the concentrates that are suitable for the product. I think, in general, there's the majority of the companies out there now are the good actors, and they're doing things right.
And Sean, from your perspective, you supply many of these companies with flavors all around the world. What are you seeing around that safety perspective? Is there a lot of thought being put into that?
There's a lot of ignorance. On one side of things, we see like the Dutch government going to a hard set of CAS numbers and saying these components. I think it's very misguided because as a unprofessional litigator, I would say, you're saying that these CAS numbers are safe? Okay, so if there's any harm caused, then you're at fault, right?
Right. Okay,
which is absolutely ignorant, okay? I'm working to fight against what's happening with the Dutch government there. I see that sometimes they want to go to a CAS set of numbers, and at the end of the day, no one's going to be honest, okay? Because I'm not going to give away my IP to the public domain of what makes my raspberry flavor better than Capella's raspberry, right? So, and then it's even in the United States when we went to a very great idea, which to take the drug master file, okay, where we submit under proprietary confidentiality under the Washington Free Trade Act, our information to the FDA and the US government, okay, we all decided that we were going to give them our information, but in a different dosage. So, okay, I'm going to give you trace detectability up to 13 parts per billion. Okay, but the next guy did his analysis and hands it to the government with a completely different range of detectability. So I might have just shown you the cream on top of my coffee, but I didn't show you the black stuff underneath, right? Is diacetyl a problem? Well, really, we've overblown diketones completely, okay? In small amounts, we're never going to have a real problem with it. I would say half of the industry still uses different diketones. They don't use diacetyl anymore, but they're using something else, okay? So the trends in flavors are obviously one thing. Trends in regulation of flavors is, it's a prohibitionist attitude. It's either I'm going to kill flavors, nothing but tobacco flavors, okay, and no fruit flavors, because they're the enemy. They're the ones that are attracting kids. I would say, and I've tried to argue scientifically, that kids vape for a nicotine high. It's a cheap, okay, little recreational thing, just like alcohol, just like recreational drugs are for kids. The flavors are nice. It's a nice little added treat. It's like the prize in a Jack in the Box, the flavor. Adults, though, need flavors. And my quote line to government is, kids like flavors, adults need them to transition away from traditional tobacco. And they're absolutely needed. We have seen the science, the numbers. I'm following stats like you wouldn't believe with a number of groups. Okay, when flavors are removed, okay, tobacco smoking rates go back up, both in youth and adults. So you pull the flavors out of the marketplace, you just leave it to tobacco. I believe, and I haven't proven it scientifically, but I would say that if all we had is tobacco vapes, okay, the gateway theorem is more real in that sense. That if I was vaping tobacco vapes as a 16-year-old, I could transition to a nice Marlboro cigarette. I can't transition from a delicious raspberry lemonade, okay, to mild or bold tobacco. Very, very improbable.
And I think that brings us on to a really interesting point, and that is, we've seen a lot of changes with US regulation, but what we don't really understand is how does that US regulatory change affect what's happening in the rest of the world? And is it affecting what's happening in the rest of the world? Now, you do PMTA submissions in the US, right? But you also do regulatory and compliance for other markets too. So how do you see what's happening in the US affecting the types of compliance that you now have to put up with?
Well, from our perspective, the US is so ambiguous that nobody really knows what's right or wrong. At least with Europe and locally, the regulations are pretty clear. They tell you what needs to be done. They tell you what international standard you need to follow. And you get listed or you don't. The people have spent millions in the US and they're still in limbo. So I'm not sure whether there's the US ambiguity has affected the regulatory landscape anywhere else in the world. Maybe positively, maybe other competent authorities have looked at it and said, we don't want to do it that way. We want to get a little bit more clarity in it. I don't know, perhaps Sean's best placed to add his comments on that side, I would say.
I can't actually hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I know. I have to try and lip read as well.
There's no feedback.
I know. So I think what Lee was saying was that he's not seeing a huge impact in the regulatory environment in the other countries from the US.
Well, I mean, it's certainly not positively impacting it. I would say regulators are copycats. I have learned to read regulation as a non-legalese guy. So I can speak legalese as a non-lawyer. And when I look at regulations in different countries, I almost believe that they copy and paste stuff. Okay, oh, look at that. That's good protection. Let's copy that in. Just change the wording a little bit and throw it in ours. But what we have to prepare for is everything we have today, although it's getting worse, is all going to change because science is catching up with vaping. I believe that. I believe that the industry can act more responsible and will eventually. And there's going to be TPD3. And guess what? I'm actually going to go negotiate with the head of the FDA because they're in that position right now where they've got caught, okay, acting capriciously. I've got 5 litigations against them right now I'm writing amicus briefs with lawyers right now, and we're going to win in the United States. And guess what? I feel sorry for clients that I see, and I recognize just walking in here, 17 American clients of mine coming in, and the millions of dollars that they've spent all went to waste. Because there's going to be a whole new PMTA process that's actually going to be standards, not guidance based. Okay, we'll have standards that we have to follow through. So whatever science they presented, okay, was completely on their own and it has no value in the next. I know guys that have spent $15, $20 million, guys that are in this crowd, and all of that money was wasted.
And I think, you know, the MEAA are starting off on their journey here in Dubai and this region. And I think they're still struggling on putting their regulatory framework together to make it work for companies. If we were to give them advice based on all of the regulatory frameworks that we've seen around the world, what would be your 2 pieces of best advice to give to this government on the regulations here?
Well, first they have to get organized. I told them the opportunity, okay, you got to organize an advocacy organization here. If you don't have somebody defending your rights, believe me, the government isn't protecting them for you. That's so, okay, once you get in there, it's public relations, public relations, public relations, public relations, okay? Lobbying is great, but if I've dealt with one lobbyist, I've dealt with 1,000, unfortunately. No disrespect for any lobbyists in the crowd, okay? But they're going to get you the meeting, but they're not going to fight the fight, okay? I've never met a vaping lobbyist yet, okay? If you can point me to one, I'd love to talk to them. But they don't have the passion. Lobbyists by nature have to maintain neutral, okay? They can't disavow themselves from the political party in power, right? So they'll get you the meeting, but when you decide that, as I have, I'm going to sue the government, I've gone to the Supreme Court, okay, and won once, okay, but I've gone to the Supreme Court 4 or 5 times, they're not going to carry with you. So you really have to focus on figuring a way to communicate proper information in science, and that's PR.
Aaron, what do you think? What would your 2 pieces of advice be?
I don't know, like going back to my point around optionality, I guess it's like, again, we're developing these products for that consumer, so there are going to be consumers that want that authentic tobacco flavor in the vape, which, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is also very hard to achieve in vapes. You know, tobacco flavor extraction is incredibly difficult, so it's hard to achieve that. And then also on the flip side, as we know, there's smokers that don't want to be reminded of tobacco, they don't want to be reminded of cigarettes, and that's why they choose fruit flavors. So, yeah, you know, shifting over to tobacco flavors isn't the answer, and it's not even a good enough product really to be able to shift them back over to that and retain them. So yeah, that's my point of view there.
And Lee, from a compliance perspective, you know, we struggle with, you know, even in the UK, with getting all of the companies to be compliant. But in this environment, there's a lot of black market that we deal with here. So what would your bit of advice be to the government if they were to look at changing things to make it better here?
I'd probably suggest they turn the volume down to start.
He said turn the volume down.
No, I think in general, the experience that we've had with ESMA and the local authorities and competent authorities is that they're probably more on it than what we've seen in Europe. You know, the enforcement is very, very good. The fines are exceptionally high. I think that from experience, the black market perhaps exists a little bit more throughout the region rather than in the UAE. But you know, the regulations themselves are essentially a gold-plated version of the TPD. And what they've done here is very, very strong in as much that they've implemented international standards for manufacturing and testing, which still don't exist in Europe. You know, we touched on this last year on this panel, where they're doing, in general, they're doing things a lot more better than the European authorities. So it's hard to make any suggestions for them to do it better when they're already far better than what we're seeing in Europe.
One more point, John, sorry, is that like we also have to make these accessible, right? Consumers need access. They don't need to be going through all these, hoops and obstacles to get these products, and that's what's driven the disposable vape category. We've talked about simplicity and affordability, but at the end of the day, it's all about accessibility. And if you speak to some of these leading brands in the disposable vape market, they won't tell you that they've made a brand. They'll tell you they've created access. And in the UK, there's an argument that we could say it's too accessible. But in a category where there's very little brand loyalty, some of these big I keep on saying disposable, I should say single use. Some of these single use brands, they've created brand loyalty because they're there for the consumer. The consumer's not left short of a product. They know where to get it from, and if it runs out, they can go and get another one. So like accessibility is crucial, and all these restrictions is going to restrict accessibility.
Absolutely. And that leads to an interesting question on youth vaping. We hear it all over the news. In fact, I'm doing an interview on it later on today. But does the industry need to take responsibility for this youth uptake of vaping? Or is it a regulatory issue? Who would like to kick off on that one?
Go ahead.
Well, you want to go? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a collective thing for sure. I think the industry is pretty good. What's letting us down, particularly in the UK, is the lack of enforcement. We recently commissioned a study for a collection of Freedom of Information Acts through various trading standards authorities. And in the last 2 years in the UK, the amount of convictions and fines were ridiculously low. And so I think much of the responsibility should lie on the enforcement or the lack of enforcement, because it's ridiculously inept at this point. I think that the industry, we're part of the UK VIA, and everybody within the UK VIA is exceptionally hot on ensuring that we've got a robust argument and everybody's doing what they should be to combat this youth issue.
Aaron, what do you think?
I'm going to say an advocate statement here, but those youth vapors, we all went to school. Those youth vapors would have been youth smokers behind the sports shed right at school. I mean, people at the end of the day need they want and have reasons to have nicotine. I'm not a smoker, but I am a nicotine user because I personally feel those benefits of nicotine, and I use that in my work. But then when I was talking about accessibility, we've discussed it, John, is that, they are almost too accessible. And when we speak to some vape stores in the UK, at one point they'd be competing against the vape store around the corner. Now they're competing against not only the convenience stores and the garages, but they're also competing against barbershops or phone stores. That they can go to a wholesaler, they buy it, and then they sell it. So you have to have that middle ground where it has to be accessible. But I think there needs to be a license or something for that retailer to be able to sell that product, because it's almost becoming too accessible.
Sean, from your perspective, what do you...
Well, I talked briefly about the emergence of responsible industry movements. BAT in Australia is putting lots of effort and energy. Too little, too late, unfortunately, but it's a very interesting similarity to what we've concluded. We're either irresponsible or responsible. One of the two. Right now, there is youth vaping. It is an issue. It is a nuclear weapon against us that is never going away. So we either organize as an industry to be responsible, to take ownership, to look for it, okay? And there's simple solutions. There are solutions that we're right now in the midst of negotiating with the US FDA, okay, because they're looking for solutions. It's a terrible problem what to do with us, okay? Throw us in the black market, have fun, right? You lost the war on alcohol, it was called prohibition. You lost the war on drugs, okay? Now marijuana is completely legal in Canada and becoming legal in the United States as a recreational drug. I mean, cocaine is going to be legal in the next 10 years the way it's going, okay? So if you want to carry on and just let us participate in the black market, I say go for it. I sat down with a senator, okay, who was talking pretty tough smack to me, and I turned to him and I said, you realize that 75% of the ingredients in e-liquid are available at the grocery store, right? Okay, this isn't cocaine, okay? I don't have to smuggle it from South America. I don't have to bring it in with some crazy drugs. I can build it, and we started this industry building it on our kitchen table, okay? 12 years ago, there was no massive companies. There was Kanger, there was a couple Chinese companies, okay, that were selling juice and old atomizer devices, 808 e-cigarettes, and then we created the industry, right? And I saw it happen in California, from nothing to something, from an underground industry. If they want us to go back, please, we'll go back, but we have the choice right now. That's the funny thing we don't realize. That's what I'm trying to present to you. You guys here in the Middle East have the choice how your future is going to go. I'm telling you, it's going to explode, and you're going to look like and feel like me, okay, in 3 years here if you don't do something. Kids are always going to want to vape, okay? We have to take responsibility.
Absolutely, and I think that comes down to how the products are marketed, designed, and the look of the product as well. You know, looking around the room today, we see many great manufacturers here that are producing products that look like they're designed for adults, that they look like they're designed for people looking to give up smoking. But there's a few, for instance, that are a little bit on that borderline of looking like toys. And I think that's something that manufacturers really need to be cognizant of, because it does, as you said, Sean, this gets thrown back in our face every single day as the industry just trying to target kids. And unless we take that seriously, we are going to be into trouble. I'm going to open it up to the floor in a second for questions, so if you do have some questions, just raise your hands. But I have a really interesting question at the moment, and that's around the WHO. The WHO has gone from being somehow positive on vaping to negative on vaping now. Do we think they've got it wrong? Sean, what do you think?
When were they pro-vaping? Maybe I'm not that old. Okay?
Well, if you go back several years ago, prior to Bloomberg sticking a ton of money into it, we were getting some positive results from them.
I flew to India with a delegation from Health Canada. We had that good a relationship. They actually invited us to come as a delegate to India, okay, for the WHO meeting. Okay, they were handing out money to countries. I watched 5 countries fold, okay, including India actually, okay, on vaping. Boom, it's gone. It's gone. There's just no negotiation. There's no working it out. There's no preventative regulation to jump through. It was gone, right? And Canada stood up, and we had done a good enough job that they said, screw your money, okay, we're going to figure it out. I was so proud, right? You know, we showed as an organization that we were trying to be responsible, that we were trying to self-regulate, that we were working towards fair and equitable regulation, that they said, nope, okay, we're going to figure it out, which led to them creating the Canadian Vaping Act, which separated it from tobacco, right? But the WHO is pure evil in my world. Okay, sorry if there's any WHO people.
Sean, what do you think? Do you have a view on the WHO at all?
Not really. I mean, yeah, my focus is on the trends in this space, and I don't know. My job is to try and build excitement in this space. So I don't really, I keep up with what's happening. But I mean, Sean made a really strong comment that like made me stop and think. And it's like the perception of vapes, as you mentioned in that sentence, is that they're the son of cigarettes. And for me, that was quite a strong statement. Yeah.
Fan of the WHO, Lee, or
no?
We need to worry about them.
Well, I think you asked the question of where the funding comes from and why their stance has changed in, as you say, in the last few years. But I'm far from a fan of the WHO, that's for sure.
And obviously, as everybody knows, we do have COP10 coming up, so you are going to see a lot of activity, I think, on the negative side of vaping. We're already hearing rumors of, them looking to change the definition of smoke, for instance, to include vapor. That's going to be a big issue. and various other things. So I think it's something that, as an industry, we really need to take seriously. I would like to open it up to any questions from the audience. We've got about 10 minutes left. We have a microphone over to this gentleman, please.
Hello, nice to meet you guys. I'm Jerry, and actually I'm very impressed about what Sean has just sharing with, like the most important thing is just the public image. Like imagine that you're a politician and you're running for a position, and when you know that 63% of the adult think that vaping is bad, they lead cancer, what are you gonna tell your voters? You're gonna supporting vaping? No, they're gonna say no vaping. That's the main reason why lots of the politicians, right now they say vaping is bad as well. They really don't like vaping? I don't think so. They just think that they have to say something, let everybody like support me. So I was familiar with Mr. Tony Aboud, which is the head of VTA. VTA, yeah. I even helped him to hold a quite big conference meeting in Shenzhen Baoli Lai. And most of the manufacturers, they came to the meeting and they like support, half of them, they give the donation to VTA. But what VTA did, most of the money was running into against the government for the flavor ban, right? For the lobbying, for the lawyer. That costs a lot. But is that really works? After the presentation from Sean, I think that might work, but very limited. So is there any way, like, the first question, is there any way like that what we can change from this situation, from just effective to the government, but also to the public? So that's the first question. And the second is, I know every country have their association, like we have VTA in America, we have UKVIA in the UK, but I rarely sound like all the associations, they come to the same voice, like the lack of connection. In my opinion, we're lack of leading in this industry. Like people in US don't know what their partner do in UK. People in China, the manufacturer, we don't know what the people do in US. And like we lack of a global leading. Like we have to put everybody's power together to make these things happen. This is big things. Imagine that, think about who's our enemy, who's against us. Like, and the third is like, we need continued funding. It's not just like one time or two times. I make that meeting happen in Shenzhen, like half of, as I mentioned, half of the manufacturer, they donate, but they donate once. That's not enough for the long term. We need the second year, the third years, but if they don't know what's happening, what the association is helping, what's the voice to the public, would they continue to donate in the next year, the third year? I doubt that. So what's the solution of that and what we can do? I'm interested about that part.
Well, I'll touch on that as well in a second, Sean. The UKVIA, as well as other trade associations around the world, in both Europe, Canada, in the US, and also China with the ECCC, we are in constant communication. AIVA and ourselves in Europe are in constant communication. We do share information, but I agree, there is an opportunity for a global organization, and this is something that I spoke with Mr. Awat at the ECCC last week. So that is something that will be coming down the line this year, because I think that coordinated effort is important. But funding is great, don't get me wrong, the associations love to get money and they need to get money. But we also need the manufacturers in China to follow the rules in every country. Because you can give me all the money in the world that you want, but if you're bringing in products that are illegal for our markets, that causes me more problems that your money can solve. And I think, Sean, I don't know if you've got any more to add.
I mean, I'm very tight to that story, right? Because clearly I was part of when Dimitri put together the organization to be a consultant to raise and put money together. And then I also remember vividly the day my friend John Glauser put together that meeting with Tony, and I was a board member of VTA at the time until it collapsed a couple of years ago. And Tony's a friend of mine. But that was a put all your money on Red 7, and we're going to try to stop the PMTA. And he went and took the money that Dimitri was wisely investing. They've got something here, I'm going to give them this. These guys over here are doing this, I'm going to give them this. And took the Shenzhen Manufacturers Association and said, put it all on Red 7, okay, we're going to stop the PMTA. Guess what? He didn't stop the PMTA. What I'm very happy, and have many relations with Shenzhen, is that what you're doing is you need to, the best thing you can do, apart from putting some money in the right organizations, not a lot, but enough to make sense, okay, and make sure your other people are not contributing to black market sales. I mean, all I have to do is, hi, I've got 100 grand, can you make me a puff bar, okay, with these flavors, okay? They don't have any responsibility that I'm gonna go out, okay, and put a website up called juicyjuicyjuiceboxforkids.com. Okay, and I'm going to, you'll put whatever color I want, whatever cartoon animal I want on the label of my pod, okay, and I'm going to go out and contribute to the worst element of society, and you guys don't care. That's one problem that John just said. On the other side of it, what people are doing, and I watch very closely, okay, I'm very proud of companies like Zinwi that's here, okay, that they're proving to the regulators that they can trust China, that I'll tell you, I went to Shenzhen 12 years ago, and I went to Shenzhen recently. You guys have come a long way, baby, okay? I mean, the quality of manufacturing, okay, has escalated tremendously. The old days where you sourced everything out to terrible little subcontractors to do this or that, the Cardo days sort of thing, okay, don't exist anymore. Quality manufacturing in China is number one, bar none, honestly. And I'm a manufacturer, so okay, I compete with, okay, some of you guys in the flavor world. So, but I can't say that you guys aren't doing a great job. PR that. Show them that you have standards. Keep putting it out there on Facebook where anybody will listen. Ask through your manufacturers to implement it into their marketing to say, hey, we use an ALD product manufactured by ALD. Wow, okay, you know, so-and-so manufactures our product. Wow, look what they're doing. Because that helps. Believe it or not, that helps because the natural distrust, okay, that is inherent in regulators, okay, when they know that 90% of what comes to our marketplace here is coming from China, is a barrier for advocates, right? And when we can show them, oh, look at this manufacturing here, look at their science, look at the things that they're doing to prove that they've tested things, that helps a lot.
And this gentleman here had a question.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amin. I am a scientist, and I agree with all your comments. But I think we have to invest on testing, quality control. According to FDA, I'm involved in PMTA testing. They have issued several MDOs based on little scientific evidence about the safety of these products. So therefore, it's very important that the industry should invest on testing, quality control, in order to fight the FDA. You know, thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more.
You know, I completely agree. The problem with that is, okay, distributors have to care. Okay, because what's the sense of me going out and spend $10 million on cytotoxic research to prove that my flavors, okay, will not impact negatively the harm of the human lung when no one cares? Okay, how long do I keep doing that when no one cares? Okay, so the distributor, the retailer have to care because the consumer just wants the tastiest thing that gives them nicotine for the lowest price. That's the denominator in today's retail. Sorry, and guess what? That exists in Dubai. I actually went to 3 vape shops, okay, a couple days ago, just to see if my thoughts were what I understand of retail in North America and Europe are existing here, and that's exactly the way, right? So, yeah, we need to do it, but the government is not going to tell us to do it because they don't know what to do, okay, so they'll make a mistake. Okay, they'll put us down a path that doesn't make sense, as we've experienced. They literally created an impossible puzzle in the United States with the PMTA. And then as they kept making it harder and harder, they changed the rules. I know a guy that spent $4 million doing HPHC testing, harmful product and harmful constituent testing, only for the FDA to change the list. It was useless. So we absolutely have to, but if the industry, and I'm going to say the industry being wholesaler, distributor, retailer, doesn't strive for saying there's a difference, okay, I'm going to buy quality, okay, that forces China, forces manufacturers buying from China and branding their products, forcing them into it, then guess what? Unfortunately, the world is driven by money, and if there's no money in it, then unfortunately, we're just going to get whatever we want. How do I look at any one of these disposables, and there's a million here, right? What's the difference? Price.
Lee, you had an interesting situation recently in the UK, didn't we?
Sorry, say that again,
I said
John.
we had an interesting case recently in the UK around testing of products and compliance with the regulations and safety. What processes have you seen change in the UK around that, especially with the larger retailers? How concerned are they with the product testing now?
Well, the big retailers, obviously, their reputation took somewhat of a hit on that, as we know. And I think this goes back to the point that was just raised there with the extra testing, and also the accountability with the industry has itself. And that particular case that you're mentioning there, the bigger retailers, because everybody's trying to get into them, they had the opportunity to be able to raise the bar on compliance and analytical. So ensuring that capacity is what it says and nicotine is what it says on the label, but also looking at all the other aspects, which, particularly in the UK, which seem to be overlooked. You know, banned substance screening, making sure that the ingredients are legit, as well things like flashpoint testing. A lot of this, you know, it's these regulations haven't changed. That's a misconception. People think, oh, they're changing the regulations. No, they're not. They've been in there since day one. They're just now beginning to enforce on the next element. The regulators undergo an education process as well as everybody else in the industry. So we're seeing that evolve now.
Absolutely. I think we've got time for about one more question. Got a gentleman over there.
G'day guys, how you going? My name's Alex, I'm from Sydney, Australia. I don't know how familiar you guys are with what's going on down there, but it's a right mess. So obviously they banned the personal importation of nicotine. That was the government's way of trying to stamp out nicotine in the hands of the younger guys, you know, children at home, etc. That didn't work, so they moved it to a prescription model where you need to get a prescription for your doctor, and then you have to get it dispensed through a pharmacy. And that has failed miserably. So what they've done now, due to the black market, you know, your I Get bars and all the rest, it's really taken over. I'd say probably 80% of the sales in Australia at the moment are disposables. So what they're doing now is they're pulling a complete ban on vaping as an industry. So no juices, no devices, no batteries, no coils, nothing. So I guess my question's a pretty selfish one. As someone that has a few retail outlets, an online presence, and a little bit of a wholesale supply distribution situation going on, what would your recommendation be? You know, obviously there's money tied up in businesses and stock and all the rest of it. Do you think it is a time to sort of fold and get out? Because we've only just created a Vapers Association of Australia. It's basically made up of retail outlets, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors and the like. We are meeting with politicians. We are taking them out to dinner, and excuse the French, we're playing with their balls a little bit to try to get them on our side, but it seems to be falling on deaf ears. What would your recommendation be for someone like myself that's been in the industry for about 10 years, and we are facing probably the biggest ban that we've seen, since the inception of vaping. Thanks.
Do you want to go first, or shall I?
I mean, I follow Australia. Obviously, you're a Commonwealth country, very similar to Canada. I follow all of the social media feeds of about 3 individuals. There's one female senator, Holly. She's great, okay? I mean, I write to her, okay, saying, way to go, right? You're supported. I mean, I brought back up, I had a slide up from Australia there for Responsible Vaping Australia that's being led as an initiative by BAT. They're trying to hide from it, but frankly, it's like their involvement in UKVIA or the Canadian Association. They're trying to do what's right, okay? And that's a negotiation in itself, but you need to work with them. I think it's rebuildable, but believe me, I have had more meetings, as I said. I'm not gloating over it because I wasted my time meeting with senators, meeting with politicians, having lobbyists, flying to Ottawa or flying to Washington too many times to count, and it didn't do any good, okay? To somebody on this point, they need votes. They do everything for votes and funding, right? To get reelected. That's what 75% of the job of a politician is, fundraising, right? And I find that it's really, those opportunities still exist in Australia, okay? I'm rooting for Australia, and I still believe in Australia. Call it blind passion, okay, admittedly. I already admitted that. But it is in PR, okay, and reforming a responsible industry program, okay, we call it a network, and what we're selling and pitching to the FDA in the United States, okay, but BAT is on the same bandwagon. I mean, ultimately, I'm going to be meeting after this. I only found out about it 2 weeks ago, okay, and I think it's brilliant, right? And I'm going to be talking to the European guys that are in control of it, okay, to expand it, right? Because I think that it applies to Canada, it applies to UK. I'm talking globally. The industry is smart to get involved in something that does not increase our cost of production, our cost to retail, okay, but forces us all to be responsible. I got to say that the youth initiation was caused by what? Irresponsible retailers. They're the ones that sold it, okay? The manufacturers didn't sell them, the kids, the product, okay? It was a retail, okay, transaction, and we have to get the bad players out of the marketplace. There is bad players, let's just admit it, okay? There's bad players in the marketplace, and I think the industry globally, okay, can start adopting initiatives such as this in different fashions, in different colors, in different formats that fit different, okay, governmental structures, cultures, and everything else. But the industry has to come together, and it needs compliance guys, okay? It needs a whole bunch of different guys involved in that process, okay? Nothing is free, but it's not a prohibitive cost for us to move forward to a much better future, and that the realization of this as a universal public health tool that it can be.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's already affecting the work that I'm doing. It's been thrown in my face many times over the last couple of months. Do I think Australia's got it right? Hell no. It's going to be an absolute disaster. We all know that. If you look at other countries where bans have been put in place, any type of prohibition has been put in place, the only thing that's resulted from that is an increase in youth smoking rates. That's what you're going to see in Australia. I think I agree with Sean. It is reversible, but it's going to be a huge, huge slog. I would say reach out to the other associations. We're here to try and help and support you where we can. Talking to your politicians, talking to the local people, getting doctors that are sensible about vaping involved, and you've got some really good ones already in Australia, but reaching out to them, because politicians not only will listen to their constituents, but they'll also listen to the medical community. So what we need to do is turn that balance away from a negative view from the medical community to a more positive or more balanced scientific view. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for our session. We've gone over a little bit here, but I'd like to thank my guests. I'd like to thank the audience for for listening to us today. And our next speaker will be here in about 4 or 5 minutes. But thank you very much.
Thank you,
Cool,
John.
thank you, guys.